Gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Pascrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Werfel, congratulations on your confirmation and hopefully a successful IRS filing season. I can't imagine the enormity of the job. We've had some hearings over the past session about the IRS. And I think it comes down to leadership. That's my opinion, my perception. I think you got great workers. They have to face a tremendous amount of filing and questions throughout the year, not just until April 15th, every year. The historic funding enacted in the last session empowers the IRS to answer phones and get refund checks out. And looking at the numbers, I think you put it in your testimony, I think we're going in the right direction. We have a long way to go, and you said that. I want to make writing out your taxes as easy as possible. We've promised that a number of times. We even had the postcard theory. Now we hear lip service about protecting working Americans from audits. Let's get that one thing straight. I believe there's been a sabotage of the IRS over the last years, and when Democrats were in charge, we didn't do much about it. Because you have to have a budget. You can sweet talk all you want. If you don't have the money, you can't get the resources. You marked 7 different places where you've improved in this year's filing season. Tremendous. And you've already got 117 million people who have filed. So we're halfway there. Because 50% of those folks got a check, a refund already. So we're ensuring working families face big audits while the rich get scot-free. Our hearing last year laid that out. And when you see in numbers, it's startling. Smearing fair enforcement is just code for protecting somebody. Commissioner, your predecessor shielded Donald Trump's tax returns for years. Whether he never read 6103 or not is still dubious. IRS began a ham-fisted audit the same day Chairman Neal made his appeal. It was clear. It was moderate. It was fair. Republicans did nothing while Trump's commissioner broke the law. Because you don't know the law exists or you don't know what the law says is not an excuse. 6103 is very clear, as the courts pointed out. And I don't want to hear that we went after Mr. Trump unfairly. Where the heck were these people 10 years ago when they investigated Ms. Lerner, who had your job, threw her out, and then exposed the names of 12 taxpayers who leaned to the left, whatever the heck that means, leaned to the left in the charities that they represented. I want you to comment to following our recommendations to clearly detail the mandatory presidential audit program in the Internal Revenue Manual. I've read it. Have you?
Yes, I'm familiar with the IRM on this.
Where are we?
Well, first, I'm required to clarify, of course, that any remarks that I make are prohibited to be attributed to any individual taxpayer.
Right.
We have a requirement amongst many in the presidential tax review program to review the taxes of a president. And I am in the process of understanding the different ways that the reduction in IRS resources have impacted our abilities to carry out a variety of different functions, including potentially this one. Congressman Pascrell, I think my answer for you right now is that I want to work with you and provide you more detailed updates on what we're doing on this program. But right now, there are a lot of different activities underway as we reset the priorities. And in particular, as I've mentioned several times in this hearing, we have a significant opportunity to change the way we assess the complex filings of the wealthy. We have capacities that we need to build, skill sets that we need to hire, resources that we need to put in place that right now we are not able to do the types of the review that I think middle and lower income Americans want us to be able to do to demonstrate that the tax system is fair. And so holistically, we're going to improve our overall efforts in this area. And then separately, I would like the opportunity to come back to you with an additional briefing on how that impacts anything related to the presidential tax review program.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Mr. Ferguson is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, thank you for being here today. I've got a lot to cover and would like to jump right into it. I'm going to make a plea to you to help my constituents, all of our constituents, get their money back from the IRS and to get what's owed to them. I'm going to make a plea to you to help with the mental health of my district staff that works with your agency all of the time and all of the district staffs, because they are losing their minds over the frustrations of dealing with things like a taxpayer advocacy service that simply is not responsive and not working. They are losing their minds over 4.5-hour courtesy hang-up calls. They are losing their minds trying to help my constituents day in and day out. And we have heard about all of these vast improvements, and I'm glad that somewhere in the rest of the country that's happening. So I'm going to beg you, if I get you certain cases or will you work with my staff to help get the folks the relief? Let me give you a couple of examples of why this is important. We had one small business that was looking for $1.4 million in earned income tax credits. Because of the delays, it cost $150,000 in interest. In 2021, interest payments grew to $3.3 billion, up 33%. I've got list after list after list here of the number of quarterly interest payments that in just a very few cases that my staff works. Think about this. One of these interest payments could provide benefits for a Social Security beneficiary for maybe up to 6 years. Think about that. We're struggling to figure out how to pay to solve insolvency, to fix the insolvency problem with Social Security. And if you just fix one of these cases, we could cover somebody for up to 6 years. So will you work with my office to handle this? Because another case that's very interesting is that we have a letter. One of my constituents has a letter that says you are due a 7-figure refund. Says it from the IRS. And for 3 years, they can't get an answer on it. 3 years. So I'm proud that somebody's getting a little relief, but we ain't getting it down to the peach state. So will you help us? Will you please help my constituents and my staff?
Yes, you have my commitment.
Okay, good. Look, now, here's the other challenge that we've got. This is the data that you provided regarding where the new hires in the IRS are going to be through fiscal year 31. This is the data that you provided, and we've just put it into a nice little graph form here. And so with this wonderful customer service that you have right now, and I say that very facetiously, what we see taxpayer services in the out years begins to drop significantly. So a bad problem's getting worse, yet the enforcement number is going straight through the roof, and operational support is coming down. based off of where we are right now, this whole thing is backwards. You need to be funding taxpayer services a heck of a lot more, getting folks their money back, and you don't need to be going after the enforcement side the way that you are. So, I mean, this simply does not make sense. Every single person here is talking about the problems that they have, that their constituents have with the IRS and getting their money back. And yet, what we see from your own data is that this line is coming down. So this doesn't make any sense. So taxpayer services are going down, enforcement is going up. Just doesn't make sense. So one other issue that's out there, I'm going to bring your attention to, just get your thoughts on it. I guess maybe just get a commitment. You are not planning to implement a bank surveillance scheme with IRS that was proposed before that was not, but you're making no effort to implement.
That's correct.
Okay, good. So if you were a representative, and I know that you're the commissioner, but if you were a representative, you would have absolutely no problem with HR 1010, our bill that would prohibit the IRS from implementing that bank surveillance scheme.
Yeah, I defer to the Treasury Secretary on those types of questions.
Okay. Well,
I'm just required to.
she was fairly non-committal as well, but it sounds like it's not something that you that
We have
that
no
you're
intent
gonna,
of.
so good. You wouldn't have a problem with this. So I look at this and I look at these numbers and I go back. I look at the enforcement side of it in the out years. So you say, oh, don't worry about it here, nothing here. So we're going to have all of this enforcement. So the final question that I've got for you is, how many rounds of ammunition does IRS plan to purchase this year?
I can get back to you on that, but it's
Thank you.
not, it's not
Look
a lot.
forward to it, because if you're not going to hire armed agents, it doesn't make sense for you to be hiring agents. But by the way, on your job posting board today, there's an application for armed agents. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Mr. Davis is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first of all, Mr. Werfel, let me congratulate you on your new assignment and say that I look forward to working with you. Secondly, let me thank Tracy Walker Carter and your SPEC team for their efforts to help foster and homeless youth better understand tax resources. I know how much the Earned Income Tax Credit expansion helped homeless and foster youth in 2021. Given its expiration, I'm very grateful that the Internal Revenue Service has continued its outreach to help these vulnerable youth. Third, I've got to tip my hat to our new Chicago taxpayer advocate, Vice Ola Baramio, and her team were very helpful to my office and to my constituents. Mr. Commissioner, I would appreciate your updating me with some information when it's available. In particular, when the IRS has data on tax year 2021, I would appreciate reports about the benefits of the expanded Earned Income Tax Credit, the CTC, and the CDCT in 2021. This information will greatly help us better understand how these credits impacted families and workers. And finally, like other systems in our country, the seemingly race-neutral tax policies and audit practices can have a substantial disproportionate impact on taxpayers of color. I'm glad that the Internal Revenue Service is beginning to examine these disparities, and I hope that you will keep me updated about this work and any legislation that may be needed to build on these efforts to ensure that our tax code applies fairly to all taxpayers. And I thank you and look forward to your response.
Thank you, Congressman. And I will provide you with those updates. And we are working in response to a request from Senator Wyden, chair of the Senate Finance Committee, on an assessment of of the report that I think you were alluding to with respect to potential disparate impact of IRS audits on racial minorities. Once that report is complete and we've submitted it to Chairman Wyden, I'd be happy to come and brief you on its findings and what we're doing to move forward from here.
Thank you very much. And while all of your offices throughout the country do outstanding work, there are none that does what the office in Chicago does. They're the best. Thank you very much.
Noted.
And I yield back.
Gentleman from Kansas is recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner Werfel, for joining us today. You know, as a new commissioner, I know you have your work cut out for you as far as things going on, and you know, I look forward to working together to help clarify the agency's priorities and deliver a better experience for taxpayers. And at the end of the day, helping them retain as much of their income as possible. After all, they worked for it, and paying the taxes is a task that we want to do as part of our country and the process we have here. We're all aware tax day was last week, and I know that it's fresh on the Kansas minds about how much money had gone into the federal government in Washington, D.C. via their taxes, and they want to know and have a right to know that their hard-earned dollars are going and where they're going and what's being used for. And that's true across the federal agencies, any agency that exists in the federal government. I want to talk a little bit about, you know, instead of increasing the audits on ordinary Americans, what's the IRS doing about dedicating their efforts to help focus on security and protocol? Given some of the major leaks of confidential information that's happened in recent years, you know, it's been nearly 2 years now since ProPublica published confidential information obtained through a massive leak, and still no one's held accountable. And just last week, the IRS disclosed confidential information contained in a Form 990T when it was not once but twice posted on online. And you know, mistakes like this don't inspire confidence that the IRS can be trusted with the secure, confidential taxpayer information. So why is it that nobody's been held accountable for the ProPublica leaks? And you know, as the new commissioner, will you commit that you know that you're going to focus on finding why these leaks occurred and will work to make sure that they don't happen again?
Well, let me start, Congressman, by saying, and I mentioned earlier, how important data security is. And when I first was approached about doing the IRS job and I sat down to get ready for my Senate confirmation hearing, I wrote down what are the most important implementation factors. And the first thing I wrote in tax administration is data security. It is the topmost priority. And as I mentioned earlier, in my early weeks here, I'm trying to figure out and determine what's our state of the union in terms of data security. Where do we have strength? For example, right now, I'm comfortable with our cyber profile in terms of what we're doing, but we need to stay ahead and keep investing in the right solutions. And there are areas, as for example, there are several TIGTA recommendations that we have not done yet that we need to do, and I want to close those gaps, and the Inflation Reduction Act provides us the resources. With respect to the specific issue that you raised, it's my understanding that the issue has been referred to the Inspector General. And the appropriate protocol for me at that point, once an issue has been referred to the Inspector General, is to stand back, let the Inspector General do any review that they deem necessary, and to offer to the Inspector General any support that is needed from me. And I had a general conversation with Russell George early in my term that confirmed my understanding that my role is to refer issues, let him do his work, and when he needs my help in investigation, I will be there to help him.
Which is great, and we want to make sure that inspectors generals are able to do their job wherever the work that they're doing. I guess the frustration that we feel is now 2 years in, we're hearing this constant story. There's an investigation underway, and we're not hearing anything. And are you getting updates from the Inspector General? Are you having meetings? Or you have a schedule that you'll get together every 3 months, every quarterly, get an update, or what's the process there?
Typically in any investigation, what the Inspector General will provide is immediate input to us if there's an action that we can take to close a critical gap. Let's say they're doing a review of a system for security. They won't wait 5 months and say, we see a gap. they'll come to us early and say, we see a gap, even though their study's not done yet, or the audit or the investigation. So anything that the Inspector General tells us mid-audit or mid-investigation is for us to take an immediate action. And I think in general, broader than there are ongoing Inspector General reports on data security and ongoing recommendations that were in place for years that haven't been closed, and my focus is on closing those.
Well, and that's good. I guess there's just a frustration. It sounds like this is being swept under the rug. 2 years now, nothing happening. So I know I'm about out of time. I've got so many other questions. You know, one of the things that concerns me, and I know several members already talked about it, is the Inflation Act, when it came out, only dedicated $3.2 billion out of the $80 billion for support and customer service. And that's a concern I think that a lot of us have. So my time's expired, but